Hello everyone, welcome to the Tech Podcast series. This is Lakshit Pant, your host for today from Azure Developer Community. At Azure Developer Community, we talk about multiple things that revolves around Azure. First of all, cloud, then how you can, then containers, then virtual machines. Then there is this orchestration part, and today we are going to discuss about zero downtime deployment using Kubernetes, and we have our special guest with us. So Ankit Mathur sir, who will be discussing about how you can ensure the zero downtime deployment, what exactly zero time deployment is, and before exactly starting with the topic, I just want Ankit sir to quickly introduce yourself.
Hi. I'm Ankit. I'm working as a lead engineer in Lambda Test. I manage the automation product of Lambda Test, and I have 9+ years of experience. And yeah, I think that we can discuss about the topic now.
Okay, so first of all, as you have mentioned in your bio, let's pick up the follow-up question from there only. You have mentioned the term
Mhm.
automation. For making
Right.
a quick overview, if you could explain what does the
Mhm.
automation means in the this industry
Right.
world.
Right. So basically, Lambda Test is a cloud infrastructure testing company, and we provide the platform where the QA professionals can run their automation test. By automation test, I mean they can write Selenium script and run against Lambda Test platform to validate their applications, be it a web application or a mobile application. Uh, we provide the infrastructure they can choose from the wide variety of the browser, the operating systems, and then they can run their test and validate their applications are working fine before they push their changes to production, I mean, to their customers. So basically, we are a cloud infrastructure testing company.
Okay, that's much of the how much the lambda test works. Now, coming to the topic, and could if you could explain like what does the zero time downtime deployment means and why it is
Mhm.
important for the industry right
Right.
now.
So Kubernetes is very popular these days, and I think each and every company is using Kubernetes to uh, run their applications on cloud, be it like Azure, AWS, and other providers as well. And running their application on Kubernetes provides a lot of benefits, like they can scale their applications, they can basically ensure that they're able to meet the demands of their customers, and they run their applications very efficiently on the cloud. Now,
Yeah, right.
there comes a time when when you are trying to push or build new features and push them to your application. To deploy a feature is a very critical part. Like you do want to, you could be building a lot of features, but if you're not able to deploy those features on production, then it becomes very difficult, and it blocks your pipeline or your development team to quickly deliver the features to their customers. Now, Kubernetes provides a framework where you can deploy your changes without affecting any customer. Like you can, your service is running live, and you are rolling out new features, and there is no zero impact on the customers who are using it at that time. So, if you're not using Kubernetes, you're running a traditionally deploying an application, and you want to, let's say, deploy a new code, new feature. So there will be some kind of disruption. Like for example, let's say your customer is on your application, is using it, suddenly he observes a disruption, and so that is not good for your company and your product, and your customer gets a very bad experience. So
Right.
Kubernetes provides that framework that even in a high peak traffic time, you can deploy your application uh, and basically have the impact. So, so it provides strategies. It provides you a framework, but you have to configure it. It does not
Okay.
work by default or out of the box. You have to configure it. You have to tune your application in a way that you are able to leverage that, and then are very confident that you can do a deployment in the middle of the day or in the peak traffic hours and have no impact. Uh, so yes, this is the major advantage or the benefit of using Kubernetes, that it provides such frameworks, and most of the heavy lifting is done by Kubernetes itself. You just have to leverage that part and tune your application to take the benefit of it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly. I have a follow-up question for the same. So, is it on the server side, or maybe the service provider side, or is it on the customer side? So, suppose there is something called in virtual machine, there is something called
Mhm.
hot patch, right? Where if on the
Right.
Microsoft Azure server side, if
Mhm.
Microsoft is making some major changes, then hot patch will allow us to
Mhm.
ensure zero time or the minimum, right? So,
Right.
how it is
Right.
possible? So, it is it on the
Mhm.
server side or the service provider side, or is it on the customer client side?
So it's basically on the server side. Let's say I'm running my service. Let's talk about Lambda Test. Let's say we are running our service on Kubernetes on cloud.
Okay.
Now there are, let's say, 10 pods running, which are serving all the customer requests. Now I want to roll out a new feature, that which means that I want to upgrade those pods. So what Kubernetes will provide you a mechanism is you can basically uh, roll out new pods. You can bring down the older pods without
Okay.
disrupting any customer traffic. So Kubernetes will, let's say once your pod, the existing pod, gets a termination signal that it can now terminate. So Kubernetes will stop sending the new traffic to that pod, and all the new traffic will go, or the let's say traffic will go to the newer pod. Now the newer pod can start serving it. Older pods will stop receiving the traffic, and gradually there will be a change that now the older pods are about to terminate. They're not getting any new traffic, and the newer pods have basically replaced them. So it's a rolling deployment. So
Okay.
gradually, you can roll out your change, and basically the older pods will eventually terminate because the traffic has stopped coming to them. Now they don't have any process like request to work on, so they can gracefully terminate. Now Kubernetes provide you uh, checks that you can perform, right, to ensure that those pods can now gracefully terminate, and the
Okay.
newer pods are healthy enough to replace them. So it's a strategy that the older ones will die gradually, the newer ones will replace them, and the traffic will be diverted to the newer one. And Kubernetes does this very gracefully. We just have to leverage this part of the Kubernetes to ensure that we are able to achieve the zero downtime deployment. And as you can basically, let's say, there could be other cases where you have a kind of workflow where um, your terminating pod or the older pod needs to be present until the customer is using your application. So that's also available with Kubernetes. You can keep those pods for as long as you want, but it won't
Okay.
get the newer traffic.
So just for the per se of for the beginners who are hearing this new term from Ankit sir, the pods. So you can use pods. Pods are something like a portable storage unit, so that you can simplify and
Right,
reduce the stress of moving, whether you are moving
right,
long distance or maybe
right,
local. It's something like this.
right. So pods are like the containers basically.
Yes.
So if you use Docker, so you spin up containers. So pods is just a term that we use in respect to Kubernetes. So they are very like there's like in single instance of a server. So for
Mm-hmm.
those who are just beginning with Kubernetes, you can think of a pod as a single server instance, a very small instance that is an independent unit, and you can deploy multiple replicas of pods as a single service. So let's say a service to compare an image. So if you have built a service like that and you want to deploy it, so uh, you can deploy 10 servers, 10 independent process inside the Linux container as a pod.
So now I just wanted to make a more deep dive into the this zero run deployment thing. So how do you ensure
Mhm.
that Kubernetes deployments do not cause any service disruptions, or maybe I should say affect
Right.
user
Mhm.
experience during the deployment process?
So I'll say that the making your application zero downtime deployment does involve some kind of challenges, and
Yes.
they are not an easy ones because it
Mm-hmm.
requires your application to be tuned. You need to make a lot of application level changes so that you can leverage it. So if your application is not tuned to use it, to leverage it, then it won't work for you. So
Okay.
I can give an example. Like for us, we had to change the applications in a way that they are able to leverage this behavior, this benefit. And by change, I mean that think of it like you're running your service now. One of the pod or the servers will they have to terminate, which means that whatever they are working on, they have to either save the state, they have to stop consuming if they are, let's say, working on some kind of event driven data, or they're consuming some events and taking action on that event. So they have to stop consuming the events so that
Okay.
they are no longer processing anything. So once they enter the state where they're not no longer processing any kind of data, then they are good to terminate. They're good to
Yeah, and
go down.
how do you
And
monitor these Kubernetes deployment, during that zero time downtime deployment process to ensure
Mhm.
everything is running smoothly? How do you monitor these?
Right. So uh, basically, you can use Kubernetes basic command line utilities, or you can have a very sophisticated tools. There are a lot of tools in market, Lens or any kind of APM service that you can use, cloud APM tools like Sumo Logic, New Relic. You can use these to monitor your pods. Uh, and or you can use a very plain and simple command line utilities to monitor these pods. But there are a lot of third-party tools available to monitor the current state of running pods and what is happening with them.
Now, I just wanted to ask you about the Lambda test. Like, how does the Lambda test use Kubernetes for this downtime deployment, zero downtime deployment, and
Mhm.
what are the
Right.
benefits that you have seen as a result by placing Lambda tests in between?
So if I let me start. Like initially, we were not using this Kubernetes zero downtime deployment. We were running our service on Kubernetes, and what used to happen is that whenever we have to deploy a new feature, so we had to take a downtime, which means
Okay.
that, as I said, our platform provides infrastructure for our customers to run their tests. So let's say their test is running, and now I want to deploy a new feature, which means that I'll be breaking their test. Their
Okay.
test will fail, or I may have to inform them, okay, somehow your test was got failed because we were deploying new feature. It also affected us that we were limited to some time window. So if you're deploying your code and your service is not zero downtime, you need a maintenance window. And maintenance window are not a very they're very costly because all of your customers are impacted. Let's say for an hour or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, your customers will not be able to use your product. We took the challenge of making our services zero downtime deployable. We made application level changes. We introduced a lot of changes in behavior as well, in how our application used to work, and we made most of them, almost all of them, zero downtime deployable, which means that
Okay.
uh, these days we deploy multiple times the day during the day, and we can deploy almost any time
Okay.
with a very high confidence that uh,
Okay.
even let's say there are thousands of tests running, there won't be any impact.
And when you say this is statement like you can deploy it anytime, that's a very, very big statement for in a industry, in a tech industry specifically. And I wanted
Right.
to, you to discuss about the potential risk or maybe the drawbacks of using this Kubernetes for zero downtime deployment. I just wanted you to throw some lights over this only.
Right.
Are there any? If so, then what are they?
Technically, there are no side effects. There are no negatives. I think there are a lot of benefits. Basically, it opens an opportunity for you to roll out your changes, revert your
Okay.
changes as well. Let's
Okay.
say you roll out a feature and you encounter that it is not that once you roll out a new feature, there is some kind of performance issue or some issue. So even to roll back, if you have zero downtime facility available in your service, you can do it with a very high confidence. I say that there is no downsides. It gives you very high confidence. It gives a velocity to your development teams that they can build features, deploy anytime. Let's say there's a high priority customer issue, production issue. You do not have to think about asking for a maintenance window. You can roll it out anytime. You can build a new feature today, roll it out tomorrow, and
Okay.
or maybe today itself. That's the kind of, so it gives you agility to move very fast and you're very flexible with this. downtime, zero downtime. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you tell me the basic difference between rolling updates, when you say the rolling updates, and the blue green deployments and the Kubernetes, and when it is the appropriate to use each method for this deployment, zero downtime deployment?
So blue green and rolling updates are different. Basically, with blue green, it is like you want to create uh, a replica set of your service, and
Hmm.
you want to test out how it behaves. So let's say you have a service running on your production or live, and you want to uh, spin up exact replica of that, right?
Okay.
You don't want any customer to use it. You don't want any traffic to go through it. You just want to bring a exact replica of your service and be able to test it out. Let's say you are able to test it out. You see that it is working fine, and you can flip it. You can basically flip the traffic to go to the new cluster. So
Okay.
blue green means uh, that uh, you set up a new cluster, a parallel cluster, you test it out, you ensure everything works fine, and then you switch the traffic.
Okay, and can you explain also the how does this affect the latency during the deployment with Kubernetes, like the latency part?
So, right. So, if I talk about the zero downtime deployment, there's not much of a significant latency because you think of it as that you basically have a set of servers which are serving your customer request. You are
Okay.
gradually replacing each one of them, and so there is not much of a latency. Kubernetes is doing the routing part for you, and you don't have to worry
Okay.
about it. There is not a significant delay in this deployment part, or like in your application response time, because it's not like that your requests are queued or they are blocked or they are just waiting. Not waiting. Your service is running. Whenever your request comes, Kubernetes routes it to one of your pods or your servers, let's say. Now, uh, at after a certain time, when you deploy a new pod or service, it will route it to the newer instance, not the older instance. So
Okay.
there is no effect, and it provides you two matrix, like two services like health checks, liveness check. These health checks, they ensure that your service running in a Kubernetes environment is always in a healthy state.
So
Hmm.
how does this synchronize the data between the nodes during the zero downtime deployment?
So see, zero downtime deployment is very much similar to the existing deployments in Kubernetes.
Okay.
So let's say your service is not a zero downtime deployable service. What Kubernetes will do when it receives a request to refresh these pods, then it will simply go send a termination signal to each of the pod. Those pod will receive that termination signal and will die. The newer pods will be spinned up. They will replace the older ones, and once this is complete, your deployment is over. But the problem is, let's say your pod was processing a request, right? It received an API call, it was processing on that request. Now it got a termination signal from Kubernetes. When it received the signal, it simply exited. That request which was pending, it was not served. This is the problem without zero downtime. What zero downtime helps here is that it sends the signal to the pod. Now your application is in control. It received the signal. It can
Okay.
now take the decision to whether hold or to terminate immediately. It can buy some time. It can hold on to, let's say, another 10-15 minutes, complete that pending request, and then terminate. So
Okay.
you don't have any failed request or failed processing at your end. And it's not very different from a regular deployment. If you're running your service on Kubernetes, um, you basically know that if you're going to deploy a new code, there will be some disruption um to the existing customer who are using it at that point. And
Yes.
with zero downtime is majorly the application level changes that you do. It's majorly application level changes. and those enable you to roll out very smoothly without any customer impact, because you're doing all those complex process like handling in your application. It's not Kubernetes doing it. It's just providing you a platform or strategy. You are doing it in your application code.
Yeah, exactly. And now we have discussed a lot more about zero downtime deployment. I want to know your personal thought. Like, what are the advancement you are more excited about in Kubernetes with the
Mhm.
zero downtime deployment?
We have been using it extensively in Lambda Test. Almost all our services across all the product lines, they use this zero downtime deployment strategy. For all the new services that we build, we definitely make them zero downtime deployable. What I'm more excited about is that with Kubernetes, they do provide other strategies and benefits like auto scaling. Auto scaling is something that we have been playing around. We have been using it for quite some time, and it basically allows you to scale uh, your service whenever the load increases and scale down when the load decreases. Now, combine this with the zero downtime feature. You are able to scale your service to any amount of node pods when the customer traffic comes, and very gracefully trim the servers when the load is not there. It gives
Okay.
you flexibility. It has a lot of cost benefit, and uh, this gives you a freedom to basically have to serve based on the customer load and save cost and be a very high performance service. So combine this with the auto scaling.
Yeah, and when you say new things are being introduced, definitely there are much more things to come. Much more things are going to build.
Mhm.
Much people are building everything every day. So I have also one follow-up question for the same. Like, what do you think apart from this Kubernetes? What's the next step? First we had these VMs, then we have these containers, then we are now at Kubernetes. And my first question will be, what's the next step that you see that is coming that can be a real game changer above to this Kubernetes? And the next question would be for if you could give a real time example of a Kubernetes or maybe a zero time deployment, downtime deployment that we are using, any application that is running right now that specifically we are using, the mass is using. So if you could, yeah, address these those.
Regarding your first part, where the next step would be, I guess the next big thing would be that right now a lot is required from the application side to achieve zero downtime deployment, because
Okay.
Kubernetes provides you a very limited set of features, and you have to uh, make a lot of changes in the application side. I guess with time we'll see that they can provide us a lot more benefits from the framework side, and also the auto scaling part that the Kubernetes provide. Uh, Once that improves, it has a very low response time to scale the service. It gives a lot more flexibility and metrics that you can choose to scale your pod. Right now, I think they provide mostly CPU and memory as the basic standard to scale your service. But there could be other metrics like network or the IO. And let's say we get an option to choose those metrics that, let's say, when the number of requests on your service increases on a single pod by this factor, that you should be scaling the pods or your service. So with more advanced metrics and these features, it would be really great and helpful to scale our services on a lot more different parameters than just the memory and CPU. That's what the next big thing would be, and that would enable a lot many developers and companies to scale easily. I mean, right now they have to work on their applications a lot, and to ensure that it does not have any leaks. But with more of these features moving to the Kubernetes framework, it will be more easy.
Okay.
The next question that you said is that live service that is using zero downtime deployment. I think Lambda Test is one big example I can give you. I'm not sure about the other services, other companies that are using it extensively, but we are using it extensively. You can try our platform and you won't see that there is a you are just facing any kind of disruption immediately in middle of the day. But we would be deploying our code. We have been
Okay.
like we, for example, we deployed our code in the morning. We have a daily deployment schedule. We deploy our services, but there was no downtime. There was no customer impact, and we were able to deploy our code, test it out
Yeah.
uh,
That's
very
fantastic. Yeah.
gracefully.
Yeah, that's
So and
fantastic. And I kudos to you. You do have definitely, as a head of engineering, you're definitely doing a great job. Making it a zero downtime deployment and ensuring with multiple, as you said, deployments on a day going on, and you have made the
mm,
tech to next level. So that's very nice. Kudos to you for that. Yeah. So, any advice you have for the developers at the last moment of this podcast here for the developers who are already working and these services who are already introduced to these services? What would be
mhm.
your advice for them to learn? What should they learn new to be some kind of so that they it would be helpful for them in next 5 years?
Right. So I would suggest the developers to be more aware of the infra on which their application is running because that's very critical to them. They should be aware of that part. They should strive to make it to use all these features with the infra features that they can leverage, and uh, it should be like they should do it as early as possible in their journey in their applications, so that in the long run they can get more benefits out of it. The later you do, the later you realize that it has a lot more benefits. It opens up an opportunity to develop features at a very high speed, deliver them with high confidence, and like you don't need to take out a maintenance window to deploy features. So basically, it increases the velocity of the team. So that's my advice, to be more aware of the infrastructure on where your
Yeah.
code is running, and that gives you a more advantage and leverage.
Yeah, that's very nice, and definitely it's a very insightful podcast for me as well. I got to know a lot more things about Kubernetes and this zero downtime deployment using especially Kubernetes and especially with alongside the Lambda test. I got to know about a lot of things. So thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you for joining. It was really nice interacting with you, and so guys, we will put all the social links of Ankit sir in the description. You can just connect with him on the LinkedIn and you can explore Lambda test. It is always there. We will provide you all the documentation on the description window. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining in.